Like, yes.
All right. Last year, I began a 5-year development project in the Solomon Islands, and I'm going to explain briefly, I hope, how I've already used minimal languages in the project and also how I plan to use it in the future. I also have a bit of a finding already, which I'll come to at the end, but it's one you might not expect. Very briefly, oh, there is a slide, if that could be shown, I don't know, but anyway, doesn't matter if it can't. Okay, very briefly, I want to say a little bit about the geography and the sociolinguistic context. If you look at the bottom right-hand slide, it's actually a Google Earth picture of one of the villages that I go to. The main point is that you really can't see much, and that's because there's not much there. And so these are very remote. This is on the island of Guadalcanal in the Solomon Islands, and really what you're seeing is a coastline and then the sea and some big rivers. I think the fact that these places are very remote has meant that there has been very little opportunity for those communities to receive development workshops and programs from NGOs like the ones that we're doing at the moment, things like water and sanitation or savings and banking. The community is multilingual. The main language there is called Longu, but everyone also knows Solomon's Pidgin, which is one of the Melanesian pidgins, like Tokpisin in Papua New Guinea, and education is in English, so people have had English or education, writing and reading in English as well. The people that have gone to this community to do the training that's just happened, and you see there a photo of training that was the official opening just in March, are not Longu speakers, but they are from other parts of the Solomons, and so they speak also Solomon's Pidgin and English, and they're expecting that people participating in these workshops and this project will be able to read and write in English and use Solomon's Pidgin. So that's sort of the context. The focus of this training and this project is to encourage families to work together. It's actually a gender equity project, but it focuses on the idea that it's not about men or women, it's actually about men and women in families and how, if they work together, they can benefit more effectively from various kinds of development training they might receive, for example, agricultural training, banking and finance. So if we still look at the slide that you've got there, one way that I've used minimal English and minimal Longu, so I use both languages, was to explain about the project through a flyer. We did this in the end of 2019, and really what I did was develop a kind of idealised family in conjunction with talking to people there about what they might expect a sort of a family that worked together looked like in their context in terms of going to the garden, the work that women would do, the work that men would do. We used illustrations also from the local context, and I had those done up, and you can see an example there. That black and white image was something we used on the brochure. In terms of minimal English, what was very important in developing this kind of story of this sort of idealised family were the primes want, do and think. So the story was really written around the idea of what families want, what they do and what they think. And then there were other kinds of important local things like gardens and villages and so on that form part of that sort of story. In the future, so far what I could say is already it's been very useful to be able to use minimal languages in the project, because this brochure was able to be used by people from the NGO doing awareness campaigns before we actually began the project, and when I couldn't go there in 2020. Of course, I still can't go there. The people were very delighted to be able to understand the project clearly through these minimal language stories, and of course it was really important to them as well that it was done in Longu as well as in English. In the future, the way I plan to use, to further develop this, but also to use what we've already done, and I should say that I had people in the community help me to develop the story. It wasn't just my own ideas. We're also expected as part of this project to have a manual, a sort of a project manual at the end. And so I'm going to be sort of linking these aspects of the story to various different parts of the modules and the activities that they do over the time of the project. By the way, the project, although it starts in this location, will be done in other parts of the Solomons as well. And so again, on your slides, you can see just one example, and it's of course an imperfect example, but to show you, for example, there's one module called Working as a Family Team for Family Goals. And so I think there's already part of the story that we wrote in minimal this is in English, but also in Longu, that reflects this idea of families working together as for family goals, if you like. So that's there in blue. When this family lives like this, the way that we've already talked about in the story, they can grow food to eat, food to give to others, food to sell to other people. And because of this, the family can do many good things as they want. And so just as an example of something that's cultural, it's built in there, the idea of giving food to other people is a very important part of their culture. So anyway, those sort of aspects will be built into the workbooks and also the manuals that we need to develop. Okay, so the other thing I wanted to say, which I think even after we've had our first lot of training in March, is that in many ways, I think the idea of minimal languages is extremely important. The people from the NGOs that ran the training reported something that didn't surprise me, but I hadn't really kind of ever, articulated. And that is that the women really only wanted to use Longu. So even though the outsiders didn't use Longu, and there were stages of the workshop where people had to present, like in a class, if you like, their group work to others, it was their community, and the women all used Longu, whereas the men would use Pidgin, Solomon's Pidgin, maybe a little bit of English, and certainly some Longu as well, because they recognised this as a kind of an outsider activity. So the idea that the women maintained their use of Longu, I think, really highlights why, in terms of gender equity and making sure that these kinds of projects are beneficial to women and that women's voices are really heard within these projects, then the explanation of what we're doing and why we're doing it, of course, has to be done in their language, but part of that is also explaining, if you like, the concepts and ideas in their language, and minimal Longu has proved to be effective already in this, and so I plan to continue to do it. And linking that idea of minimal languages, of course, it's not just minimal language, but the idea of language choice and gender equity is something I think that we can look at more carefully in terms of development and communication within development. And that's it.